Have you ever wondered why some people move through life as if cloaked in quiet invincibility, unshaken, untouched, almost serene, while others collapse at the slightest disruption? What secret do they carry that most of us have never been taught? The world hurls chaos their way. Plans fall apart. People disappoint them. Life hands them one storm after another. Yet something in them does not break. They remain rooted, centered, present, as if they belong to a different realm, one not dictated by external turbulence, but governed by an inner stillness that nothing can reach. What if this calm isn't accidental? What if it's not about being lucky or born emotionally detached, but about accessing a deeper psychological truth that anyone can reach once they remember who they truly are? Most people live as emotional puppets, yanked in every direction by forces outside themselves. A stranger cuts them off in traffic, and their peace is shattered in seconds. One passive-aggressive comment from a coworker, and their mind spirals for hours. A single disapproving glance, and suddenly they're questioning their worth, replaying old insecurities like a broken record. Life becomes a constant reaction, a battlefield of emotional triggers that never ends. We call this normal. We even call it human. But is it possible that we've simply forgotten how to live from the inside out? Carl Jung believed that the real battlefield is not in the world, but in the psyche. When you are unaware of your own unconscious, the world controls you. Everyone you meet becomes a mirror, pulling you into roles you never chose. You react, you defend, you collapse. But once you begin the work of individuation, of peeling back the layers of false identity, projection, and emotional programming, you begin to reclaim something extraordinary. You realize that nothing out there has the right to define what happens in here. The storm still comes, but you are no longer inside it. Imagine a life where no person, no insult, no mistake, no unexpected turn could touch your peace. Imagine being so rooted in your inner truth that the world's noise loses its grip on your nervous system. That doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop leaking. It means the triggers lose their power. The chaos no longer finds a home in you because you are no longer unconsciously inviting it in. What you're about to discover is not just a mindset shift, it is a psychological awakening. And once it happens, there is no going back. Nothing and nobody will ever hold that kind of power over you again. Why is it that the same event can leave one person devastated while another walks away completely unaffected? Why does a harsh comment, a cold shoulder, or a canceled plan pierce through you like a wound, while someone else simply shrugs it off? The answer is not in the world. It is in you. Most people believe life is something that happens to them, that pain is something others give them, and that suffering is caused by outside forces. But Carl Jung taught that the true source of our pain lies not in the external world, but in the unconscious agreements we've made with it. You are not reacting to reality. You are reacting to your interpretation of it. And that interpretation is shaped by everything you've hidden, ignored, or denied within yourself. Jung believed that we live as prisoners of our own unexamined reactions. Every emotional trigger is not just a momentary flare of feeling. It is a flare illuminating something much older, something deeper. When someone insults you and you feel rage rising, it's not the insult itself that holds power. It's the part of you that secretly believes it. When someone overlooks you and you feel invisible, it's not their eyes that cause the ache. It's your own longing to be seen that was never fulfilled. And when someone rejects you and you spiral into despair, it is not their absence that breaks you. It is the story you've carried for years that love must be earned. These wounds were not born in the moment. They were awakened. This is the soul's mirror. The outside world can only disturb what already lives within you. Pain cannot land where there is no opening. Words cannot harm where there is no wound. Abandonment cannot break what has already learned to belong to itself. In this light, pain becomes a teacher, not a punishment. Triggers become invitations, not threats. Every frustration, every emotional storm, every person who gets under your skin is not here to ruin your peace, but to reveal where your peace has not yet rooted itself in truth. This is the essence of shadow work, the sacred process of making the unconscious conscious, of turning the mirror inward instead of outward. To those who are asleep, triggers are enemies. But to those awakening, triggers are maps. They point to the hidden architecture of the self, the stories you inherited, the beliefs you swallowed without question, the masks you wore to feel safe. Most people spend their lives running from this discomfort. They distract, they're numb, they blame. They build entire identities around avoiding their wounds. But avoidance never heals. Suppression never liberates. Those who dare to stop running begin to notice something extraordinary. The world starts to soften, not because the world has changed, but because their perception of it has. The insults still come, but they no longer cut. The rejection still happens, but it no longer defines. The silence still arrives, but it no longer feels like abandonment. Why? Because the inner source of suffering has been seen, held, integrated. The shadows have been met with light, and where light lives, the darkness no longer controls. The moment you understand that nothing outside of you has power unless it touches something unhealed inside you, you unlock the beginning of true freedom. Emotional mastery does not mean suppressing your feelings or pretending to be unaffected. It means becoming so intimately familiar with yourself that no reaction can hijack you. You are no longer dragged around by every word, mood, or moment. You see them, you feel them, but you remain anchored because you are no longer reacting from your wounds. You are responding from your wholeness. And that is how the world loses its grip. That is how you become untouchable, not by building walls, but by dissolving the hooks, not by avoiding discomfort, but by learning what it has come to teach. The external world can only disturb you to the extent that your internal world remains unconscious. And once you awaken to this truth, you reclaim your life from every force that ever made you feel small. This is not the end of feeling. It is the beginning of real power. There comes a point in every person's life where they must confront a painful truth. It is easier to blame than to awaken. Most people don't want to hear that. Not because they are weak, but because waking up means taking full responsibility for the emotional chains that bind them. It means letting go of the comforting illusion that life is against them, that their boss is the villain, their ex is the curse, their circumstances are the enemy, or that fate itself has conspired to make them suffer. Believing life is unfair gives the mind a place to rest. It gives the ego a shield. It explains away the pain without forcing us to look at where it actually comes from, within. Carl Jung understood this psychological pattern as a form of projection. The unconscious mind, when unexamined, looks outward to make sense of inner chaos. We give power to the world to avoid facing the unresolved within ourselves. And while this defense may protect us temporarily, it ultimately imprisons us in a cycle of emotional dependency. As long as you need the world to behave a certain way for you to feel peace, you will never truly be free. You will be at the mercy of other people's moods, decisions, and behavior. You will feel like life is targeting you when, in fact, it is simply reflecting back the parts of you still crying out for healing. It's a difficult shift to make, to move from blame to observation, But it is the turning point. The moment you stop pointing the finger and start turning inward, everything begins to change. You stop waiting for others to apologize before you find closure. You stop needing everyone to agree with you in order to feel valid. You stop needing perfect circumstances to feel grounded. And instead, you begin to notice something profound. The power to end your suffering was never in their hands. It was in your perception, your beliefs, your emotional patterns. The problem wasn't life. The problem was how your unresolved wounds were interpreting life. This realization is not the end of emotion. It is the beginning of emotional sovereignty. Once you stop reacting, you stop being controlled. That is the beginning of true immunity, not the kind that disconnects or numbs you, but the kind that anchors you so deeply within yourself that you cannot be shaken by passing storms. You do not need to avoid negative people because you no longer absorb their energy. You do not need to control every situation because your peace is no longer tied to the outcome. You do not need to prove anything to anyone because you finally know who you are. This is not about becoming indifferent or cold. It is about becoming untouchable, not because you are hardened, but because you are healed. You can still feel deeply, you can still care profoundly, but your sense of self is no longer held hostage by the world outside of you. You become the calm in the chaos, the stillness beneath the noise. And when you reach this place within yourself, you realize that no one and nothing ever truly had power over you. You were simply handing it away, piece by piece, every time you reacted without awareness. The path to this kind of inner freedom is not always easy. It asks for courage. It asks for radical honesty. It asks that you look at your triggers as teachers, your discomfort as direction, and your emotions as messages. But for those who are willing to make this shift, life becomes something entirely new. The same world, the same people, the same challenges, but a completely different experience. You are no longer a puppet pulled by invisible strings. You are no longer waiting for the world to change so you can feel better. You are awake, and in that awakening, you reclaim what was always yours, your peace, your power, your presence. This is the essence of individuation, the return to the self as the source. It is not a one-time event, but a way of being. And the more you live from this place, the less anything external can distort your inner truth. This is how you become untouchable, not by escaping life, but by facing it with a self so rooted in awareness that nothing can shake its ground. There is a quiet suffering that few dare to name, though it shapes nearly every decision we make. The need to control. Most people live not from their essence, but from a deep-seated fear of chaos. They spend their entire lives chasing certainty, obsessing over outcomes, trying to manage how others perceive them, how the future unfolds, and how reality bends to their will. They want to be liked, to be safe, to feel in control. They want life to move according to their timeline. And when it doesn't, the illusion collapses, and so do they. A simple disagreement becomes a personal attack. A delay in plans triggers anxiety. A setback is experienced not as part of life's rhythm, but as a betrayal. Why? Because the ego interprets any disruption to its imagined control as danger. Carl Jung saw this clearly. He understood that the human mind, when unconscious, projects meaning onto neutral events. Life itself is neither for you nor against you. It simply is. It flows according to its own laws, not your preferences. The wind does not ask which direction you prefer it to blow. The river does not consult you before it changes course. And yet, most people suffer because they expect life to conform to their expectations. They take things personally, not realizing they are filtering reality through wounds they haven't yet healed. When someone disrespects them, they internalize it as proof of unworthiness. When life goes off track, they believe they've been cursed or punished. But the truth is, what hurts is not the event. It's the story we attach to it. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the key to the entire illusion of control. If your inner world remains unexamined, your reactions will feel automatic, your pain will feel inevitable, and life will appear to be targeting you. But in reality, you are not being attacked, you are being mirrored. Life is showing you the exact patterns, beliefs, and unresolved emotions you've been carrying all along. And if you are brave enough to look, you'll find that the one thing you do have control over, the most powerful thing, is your perception. Perception is not merely how you see the world, it is the lens through which you interpret every experience, relationship, and outcome. And that lens is shaped by everything hidden beneath the surface: your childhood stories, your suppressed fears, your unmet needs. Two people can live through the exact same event, a breakup, a layoff, a loss, and yet have entirely different experiences. One collapses, convinced they've lost their identity. The other rises, seeing the same pain as initiation, as a necessary death before a more aligned life. What changed? Not the event. The filter, the interpretation, the awareness behind the experience. And this is where real freedom begins. When you stop trying to control everything outside of you and begin mastering what is within you, you step into your true power. You stop being a puppet pulled by the chaos of the world. You become the calm center of the storm. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop attaching your worth, your peace, and your purpose to things you cannot govern. You begin to let life be what it is while you decide how to meet it, not from your ego, but from your soul. This is the liberation Carl Jung spoke of. Not detachment, but individuation. Not apathy, but awakening. When you understand that life is not something to be controlled, but something to be witnessed and participated in with awareness, you no longer fear unpredictability. You welcome it because you trust that no matter what changes outside, the self within you is steady. It is not the world that has to change. It is the way you relate to it. In the end, control is not freedom. It is fear in disguise. But the moment you trade control for clarity, illusion for inner truth, you begin to live from a place the world cannot shake. You don't need the storm to stop. You only need to stop confusing the weather outside with the weather within. That is how you stop wasting energy on what was never yours to hold. That is how you become truly unshakable. Here is where transformation begins, not in gaining more control, but in releasing the illusion that you ever needed it. The paradox of human suffering is this: the more tightly we cling to how things should be, the more we suffer when life shows us what is. The more we demand respect, the more fragile we become in the face of disrespect. The more we need others to validate our worth, the more their rejection pierces us. The more we expect life to be fair, the more betrayed we feel when it isn't. Control becomes a silent tyrant, disguising itself as safety, when in truth it only deepens our fear. Carl Jung understood that this obsessive grasp for control is the cry of an unintegrated ego, an ego terrified of uncertainty, desperate to protect itself from pain, chaos, and the unpredictable nature of life. But the cost of this desperation is high. Every time you attach your peace to external approval, you hand your power over to someone else. Every time you say, "I will only be okay if this goes my way," you make yourself vulnerable to the tides of a world that does not move according to your script. But there is a moment, sacred and quiet, when you realize this. What you let go of stops having power over you. That moment is not passive. It is not surrendering in defeat. It is awakening in truth. It is the profound shift from needing the world to obey you to trusting that you can navigate it regardless of what it brings. The moment you no longer need others to respect you, you become free to respect yourself. The moment you stop demanding that life be predictable, you awaken to your capacity to respond with wisdom in the unpredictable. And that, Jung would say, is the beginning of individuation, the path back to your inner wholeness. Letting go is not about abandoning responsibility or becoming indifferent. It is about reclaiming the energy you've spent trying to control the uncontrollable and redirecting it inward towards self-mastery. The truly untouchable people in this world are not those who dominate others or manipulate outcomes. They are the ones who have tamed the storm within. They walk into uncertainty not with arrogance, but with presence. They remain calm when insulted, not because they don't feel emotion, but because they no longer let every emotion dictate their identity. They walk through failure with grace because their worth is no longer measured by external success. When you stop making your peace conditional, life starts moving differently. Here's the paradox. When you release your grip, life often flows more smoothly. When you stop fearing rejection, your authenticity becomes magnetic. When you stop forcing outcomes, opportunities begin to unfold without strain. When you stop needing others to believe in you, you begin to believe in yourself. And that belief, calm, quiet, rooted in the self, is unshakable. You see, the moment you let go is not the moment you give up. It is the moment you return to your center. You stop living as a puppet pulled by reactions, expectations, and fears. You begin to live as the observer, the creator, the one who meets life not with resistance, but with grounded presence. Jung taught that true power lies not in the conquest of others, but in the integration of one's own fragmented self. Letting go is one of the most powerful acts of integration there is, because what you no longer need can no longer harm you. In this letting go, there is peace, and in that peace, you become untouchable, not because the world stops testing you, but because you no longer need it to change for you to be at peace within yourself. That is the essence of true strength. That is what it means to flow with life rather than fight it. And in that flow, everything, without force, begins to align. What you are about to understand is not abstract philosophy, but a direct reflection of how the human psyche operates. Modern psychology continues to show that the more we cling to control, the more tangled our emotional life becomes. When we try to manipulate how people see us, when we try to force outcomes, when we try to shape life into a perfectly predictable pattern, we unknowingly strengthen the very forces we fear. It is no coincidence that those who chase affection often repel it, that those who fear failure often fall into it, and that those who fight the hardest to control the world around them often feel the most powerless. This is not because life targets them, but because inner resistance multiplies the weight of every experience. So the real question becomes this: are you living from reaction or from perception? Because the moment you grasp that nothing outside you holds any true authority over your inner state, life begins to feel like a completely different landscape. This is the threshold of the untouchable mind. This is where your relationship with the world transforms. Imagine this: you are walking down the street, absorbed in your own thoughts, when suddenly a stranger shouts an insult your way. Their words might call you foolish or weak, or insist that you will never achieve anything meaningful. Most people would feel a sharp emotional sting. Their heart would race, their thoughts would spiral, and their entire mood would shift because a single sentence pierced an old wound. But now imagine responding with complete inner stillness. No anger, no injury, no emotional spike. Only a quiet recognition. This has nothing to do with me. That is the beginning of inner sovereignty. This is what ancient wisdom traditions, contemplative teachers, and Jung himself understood. The outside world does not disturb you unless an unhealed part of you grants it permission. People react so strongly because they are identified with a fragile self-image built on approval, appearance, and outcome. When that image is questioned, their entire identity trembles. Jung described this fragile identity as the false persona, the mask we wear to survive, and he warned that the moment we confuse the mask for the self, we become reactive to every challenge, every criticism, every disappointment. Why do insults cut so deeply? Because they touch the very insecurities we keep hidden. Why does disrespect ignite so much anger? Because our worth is still entangled with being seen, valued, and acknowledged. Why does life feel so personal when it does not follow our plan? Because we are clinging to outcomes rather than grounding ourselves in who we are. The real power is never in silencing the world. It is never found in eliminating every obstacle. It lies in developing a mind that is no longer shattered by external turbulence, a mind that stands rooted in inner truth, a mind that understands that all influence begins and ends with perception. This is not just theory. It is a form of psychological conditioning well supported by research. Emotional reactivity is a learned pattern. The brain forms pathways that repeat reactions automatically. The more you allow the world to pull at your emotions, the more entrenched those pathways become. But the moment you begin practicing awareness, reframing and leaning gently into discomfort instead of avoiding it, your brain rewires. You become less reactive. Insults lose their sting. Failure loses its meaning. Uncertainty loses its threat. And at that point, you become untouchable. Not because the world softens, but because your inner structure becomes stronger. People believe they are reacting to reality, but they are responding to their interpretation of reality. That is the great human misunderstanding. Someone's words may land sharply, but the actual pain arises from the meaning you attach to them. It arises from the stories you have carried since childhood, the wounds stored in your unconscious. Jung said it clearly. Everything that irritates us about others can guide us toward understanding ourselves. Most people reject this truth because it asks them to take responsibility for their inner life. It asks them to stop blaming the mirror and instead examine the reflection. As long as your identity is tied to external forces, opinions, validation, status, outcomes, you will be governed by them. But the moment you step back and become the observer rather than the reactor, you step into a completely different level of consciousness. Detachment is often misunderstood. It is not coldness. It is not shutting down. It is the realization that you are the sky, not the storm. Emotions may swirl, challenges may rise, but your inner awareness remains untouched. And when you stop reacting, the world begins responding to you instead. You no longer chase validation. It gravitates toward you. You no longer fear criticism. It loses its grip. You no longer collapse under uncertainty. You move through it with clarity. The key is self-awareness in real time. In every difficult moment, you have two choices: automatic reaction or conscious observation. When someone provokes you, pause. Feel the trigger without becoming it. Observe your emotion without acting on it. That split second is where your power lives. Master your reactions, and you master your reality. Once you stop letting the world pull your strings, you reclaim the authorship of your life. And that is the essence of becoming truly untouchable. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.